What if I told you that the youngest person to be executed by the death penalty in the 20th century was a black boy named George Stinney? Let's talk about it. March of 1944 started off like a normal day. 14-year-old George was outside playing with his sister, and two white girls approached them and asked if they knew where they could find a particular type of flower. George and his sister didn't know where the flower could be found, so the little girls went on their way, and George and his sister continued to play. Later that day, the two girls never returned back home, and so the community started a search party. George and his family also joined the search party to help find the little girls. And George even mentioned to someone at the search party that he saw the two little girls earlier that day. And this is where things went wrong. The next morning, the two girls' bodies were found in a ditch. And crazy enough, George was the one immediately arrested for it. George was subjected to hours and hours of interrogation with no attorney present and neither of his parents present, just him and the officer for hours and hours. After hours of interrogation, the sheriff claimed that George confessed to killing these two girls, although George was with his sister the entire day of their murder. The sheriff claimed that he confessed, although there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime at all. This same month, George's father was fired from his job, and the family was forced to leave town based on violent mobs threatening them. These same violent mobs even tried to lynch George, but he was already moved to a different jail facility in a different city. George Stinney, at 14 years old, was alone. You could imagine he was probably scared and confused after being accused of a crime that he did not commit. His trial took only 2 hours. None of his family was allowed in the courtroom. No black people at all were allowed in the courtroom. His court-appointed lawyer was a tax attorney, which I just want to make it very clear is totally different from a criminal defense attorney, which is what he should have had. The prosecution called only one witness, which was the sheriff, claiming that George confessed to these crimes. Nevertheless, George's lawyer did not question this sheriff on the stand. George's lawyer also did not call one witness on George's behalf to testify. The all-white jury deliberated for only 10 minutes, and they found George guilty, and he was sentenced to death. On June 16, 1944, George Stinney was killed by an electric chair. He was so small that he had to sit on a book to be executed. He was only 5'1" and 90 pounds. He was a young kid who was guilty of nothing more than just being a black boy in the Jim Crow South. He was not just killed, but he was murdered by the criminal justice system. And there's a lot of people during that time with blood on their hands. Now, I would be remiss not to mention that he was posthumously exonerated in 2014. This means that his conviction was reversed decades after his death. But I ask you, what good does that do for him? His life was tragically cut short. He spent the final months of his life alone, not even able to see his family. There needs to be a greater conversation about the criminalization of blackness, which stems all the way back to slavery with slave codes, the Reconstruction era with black codes, and the Jim Crow era with things like this. He wasn't innocent until proven guilty. To them, he was guilty, and nothing could prove otherwise. And this is why black history is important. And if anybody ever told you any different, they lied to you.